Hello dear students, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. So today is Tuesday, 9th July 2024, and today we have some important articles from both the Hindu and Indian Express newspapers, and one by one we try to discuss all those important news articles in a very detailed and comprehensive manner, so that this discussion will be helpful for prelims and mains examinations, right? So before discussing them, we try to solve yesterday given practice question. You all knew that yesterday I've given one practice question, right? So that is with respect to the line of actual control, right? So this is the question that I have given to you yesterday. The question was, consider the following statements or consider the following states sharing the boundaries with the line of actual control are arranged from right to left. Now when it says now first understand what is line of actual control. Now line of actual control is a demarcation line between India and Chinese border, right? So it is not a settled border between India and China, rather it is just a demarcation line between India and China. Now when we talk about this question, this line of actual control is actually located across different states, right? So but just observe the Indian map, right? So this is how Indian map usually looks. Now this is the regions where the line of actual control is actually located, right? Since the question has been asking us to arrange them from right to left, right? This is right and this is left. So arrange them from right to left, we need to proceed in this direction, right? So the correct answer for this question is option A, right? Because first Arunachal Pradesh, then Sikkim, and after that Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir, right? So this is how the line of actual control is actually located. Now we cannot say that it is Jammu and Kashmir, rather we can say that Ladakh, right? So therefore the correct answer for this question is option A. Option A is the correct answer, because when we arrange the line of actual control, that is a demarcation line between Indian and Chinese borders, so from right to left, so first Arunachal Pradesh and then Sikkim and then Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh and this Ladakh region. So therefore the correct answer for this question is option A. Now briefly see the explanation part of it. As I've already told you that this line of actual control is an imaginary demarcation or dividing line between Indian and Chinese territory, right? So this ongoing border dispute between India and China is also centered around the line of actual control. And in fact, when we talk about the line of actual control, it is in fact an unofficial border, right? This is just an imaginary line, but it is an unofficial border, and this unofficial border line separating areas which are controlled by India on the southern side, and on the northern side the areas which are being controlled by China. And in fact these are the regions so where the border issue is still unsettled, and because of that reason very frequent skirmishes and conflicts have been taking place between Indian forces and the Chinese forces. And we have also observed that, for example, when we talk about the skirmishes between Indian and Chinese forces, this Doklam conflict, so this Doklam conflict was in 2017 that took place. And apart from this Doklam conflict, we have also seen recent Galwan clashes between Indian and Chinese troops, and this Galwan clashes have also led to the death of around 20 Indian soldiers, right? So these kind of disputes centered around line of actual control are very often taking place, and the border dispute between India and China, so along the LAC, is also one of the major problem that both countries have been looking to ensure peace, tranquility and stability in the line of actual control. Now when we talk about the states having this line of actual control, through which state this line of actual control has been passing through, right? So when we talk about the states, the easternmost state was Arunachal Pradesh, and after easternmost state Arunachal Pradesh, then Sikkim, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh and present day Ladakh region. So this is how the line of actual control is located across different states, and this is how we can arrange those states from the right to left. And if you are asked to arrange these states from left to right, so you can go through this order, so reverse order, right? So right to left and left to right. Now today also I have one prelims practice question. This is also a very important question because it is in news very often. So the Brand line It is also an imaginary line is a concept that highlights which of the following: A. Global climate change, B. Global food security, C. Global economic disparities, and D. Access to clean drinking water. So try to understand and answer this question in the comment section, and I'll be giving you the correct answer in tomorrow's class. Right? This is also a simple question. Just try to answer this question. Now, first and foremost topic that we are going to start this discussion is, this is also a very important topic, unemployment in India. Now, the unemployment rates in India, one of the highest in the world. Now, why highest in the world? We have a number of workforce who are willing to work. So even though the workforce is willing to work, there are lack of adequate or gainful employment opportunities in India. Now, if you look into the structure of Indian economy, so we have a major proportion of our workforce concentrated in the agriculture sector. But the problem with the agriculture sector is disguised unemployment, right? So even though in agriculture sector there is a requirement for very less number of workforce, more number of people were working in the agriculture sector. But on the other hand, the industry and manufacturing has not developed to such a level that it could absorb the excess workforce from the agriculture sector. But when we talk about the service sector is not a labor intensive sector. So it is not a labor intensive sector, and that is where the problem comes. It is capital intensive, technology intensive. Now when we talk about the service sector, this service sector is not labor intensive. It's not labor intensive. Now, what does labor intensive means? For example, when we talk about textile industry is a labor intensive industry. It requires or it employs too much of labor or good number of labor. So therefore, it provides gainful employment opportunities. But when we talk about the service sector, it is not a labor intensive sector, and apart from that, it is a capital intensive sector. And apart from being capital intensive, so it is also technology intensive sector, right? So technology intensive and capital intensive sector, but not the labor intensive sector. And because of that reason, we were not able to absorb adequate employment, or we will not be able to create adequate employment opportunities for the youth. But on the other hand, manufacturing sector and industry have a lot of potential to create employment opportunities, right? Skilling, vocational training, entrepreneurship, all those things provide gainful employment opportunities. But the problem is that we do not have adequately skilled manpower, and at the same time, vocational skills or technical training is also not given to young workforce. And the educational standards, especially the higher educational standards, were also poor. Lack of entrepreneurship. And despite government announcing a lot of incentives for the private sector participation, there are a number of factors, because across South Asia and Southeast Asia, there are a lot of competitive economies, and they are more attractive destinations for investment rather than in India. For example, when we talk about Vietnam, Indonesia, so they become more competitive and more attractive for the foreign direct investment rather than India. So all these factors have been making that India, with a substantial population at the working age, not able to provide gainful employment opportunities for the youth. So that is the problem with respect to India. Now, understand the context of this article, and then we'll go into the details, looking into the data with respect to unemployment in India, and what are the reasons for the unemployment, and how can we actually deal with the unemployment. So that we will be discussing, right? So recently, Ministry of Labor has actually rebutted a recent report by a Citigroup. And this recent report that was published by the Citigroup actually held that India will struggle to create sufficient employment opportunities even if India grows 7% per annum every year, right? So despite India registers a good growth rate, India will not be able to provide gainful employment opportunities for the existing workforce, and that is what the Citigroup report has said. Once Citigroup has come up with this report, Ministry of Labor condemned this report, right? So Ministry of Labor has immediately said that no, this report is not true. So it is saying that despite we grow at 7% growth rate per annum, we will not be able to create adequate employment opportunities, or unemployment levels will be higher. So that's not true, and that is what the stand of Ministry of Labor. right? So as I can tell you that India's growth is very often called as jobless growth by the experts, right? So our growth is jobless growth. Now why it is jobless growth? Because again I can emphasize on the service sector. Majority of a GDP comes from the service sector. Now the problem with the service sector, it is not a labor intensive sector, rather it is capital intensive and technology intensive sector, and it has been contributing to the highest GDP. However, when we talk about the agriculture sector contributes around 18 to 19% of India's GDP, but it has been employing around 48% of the India's workforce, right? So in agriculture sector, the workforce concentrated more than what is required, and that is the problem. So therefore the concern of the governments is to absorb the excess workforce in the agriculture sector into the manufacturing and industry or service sector. But manufacturing and industry have a lot of potential in India to create a huge employment opportunities or gainful employment opportunities, and that is the key thing here when we talk about the manufacturing and industry. Now in this context, the problem is that India's growth has actually skipped the manufacturing and industry sector. We directly jumped from the agriculture sector to service sector, right? So if you look at the developed economies and the structure of developed economies, first they were agrarian economies. From agrarian economies they transitioned to industry or industrial economies, from industrial economies to service sector led economy. So this is how the economic transition takes place. But India, so we have skipped this manufacturing or industry and we jumped from agriculture sector to the service sector, and because of that reason, so India's growth is known as jobless growth, and the Citigroup report findings also in conformity with this jobless growth statistics. And in fact, by condemning the report published by the Citigroup, the Ministry of Labour has actually stated that the official sources like periodic labor force participation data and Reserve Bank of India data actually shows that there is a consistent improvement. There is a lot of improvement in the key labor market indicators. Now that essentially means that this particular data has been indicating over a period of time the unemployment rate in India has been gradually declining, and that is being shown in the data which was published by labor force participation rate or women workforce participation rate, and that indicating declining unemployment rate during the last 5 years. However, so we need to understand the state of unemployment in India. Now what exactly is the state of unemployment? You can also go through different states and the prevalent unemployment rate in these different states, right? So when we look into the state of unemployment in India, so this unemployment report, India Employment Report 2024, right? So this India Employment Report 2024 is jointly published by Institute for Human Development and International Labour Organization. So these two organizations publishes the India Employment Report 2024, and in fact it has a lot of important details with respect to unemployment or employment creation in India, right? So according to the India Employment Report 2024, India's working population increased from 61% in 2011 to 64% in 2021. Right, so this is the increase in the working population in India from 2011 to 2021, and in fact by 2036 the total working population projected to increase or projected to reach 65%, right? So it will reach peak. Now what does it mean when this report says that India's working population is 65? India's total population, the working population, the population who are actively working, they're part of the economic activity, are 65% of the total workforce. Now imagine that India's population is 100 crore. Now if India's population is 100 crore, by 2036 it is expected that 65% of India's population will be part of India's working population or India's working age population, right? So therefore by 2036 around 65 crore people will be part of the economic activity, in case if we take the population to 100 crore. And apart from that, the percent of youth involved in the economic activities declined to 37%, in 2022, right? So the total percentage of youth who are part of the economic activities has actually shown a declining trend in recent times. And apart from that, there's some data also. So it is important to remember this data, because if you code this data in your mains answers, so you will get more marks. Now when we look into the India Employment Report 2024, so this has provided some key details with respect to unemployment and employment in India. Now when we talk about the unemployment rate in India, it stood at 9.2% in June 2024, right? So this is the recent data with respect to the unemployment in India. So it is around 9.2% by June 2024, and in fact it is actually indicating a sharp rise from 7% in May 2024 to 9.2% in June 2024. There is a sharp increase in the unemployment rate in India. And after that, we need to talk about the female unemployment rate also, right? This female unemployment rate has also been substantially increasing. For example, it has reached 18.5%, exceeding the national average. And so this is 18.5% unemployment rate in female is June 2024, and in fact this has increased from 15.1% in the same period last year. Now what it means when I say 18.5% of female unemployment, right? So this essentially means that the women or females, they're ready to work, right? So women ready to work, but they did not find the employment opportunity, and that is the female unemployment. I hope you have understood. Now this female unemployment is 18.5% in June 2024. However, this female unemployment has increased from 15.1% last year to 18.5%. And at the same time, when you look into the male unemployment, so male unemployment, again there was a slight increase in the male unemployment, because in June 2023 the male unemployment was 7.7%, but now it slightly increased to 7.8% as per this recent unemployment data report. And after that, we need to talk about the labor force participation rate also. So this labor force participation rate in the economy or economic activities has actually increased to 41.4% in June 2024. So that was from 40.8% to 41.4%, right? So this is to some extent an increase in the labor force participation rate. However, when we talk about the rural unemployment, so the rural unemployment rate also increased to 9.3% in June from 6.3% in May. So there is a substantial increase in the rural unemployment rate also compared to May of this year. And urban unemployment, so urban unemployment has also climbed from 8.6% to 8.9%. So this is some data with respect to the existing unemployment rate across India, so both rural and urban areas. Now it is important that we need to understand how unemployment rate is calculated, right? So see, understand that last year 2023 mains examination, there was a question on this, how unemployment rate is calculated in India, right? So what is the methodology or what is the procedure to calculate unemployment rate in India was asked a question in the mains examination, right? So the unemployment rate is expressed in percentage terms, right? So there is no doubt that unemployment or gainful employment opportunities that actually influenced by the economic conditions. There is no doubt about that. For example, there is a good economic growth. So good economic growth actually means that a good productivity in the economy, and that creates a lot of employment opportunities, right? So it is actually a multiplier effect. So a good economic growth would result in better demand, and better demand actually means that increased production, and increased production in the sense that the industries require more labor for to meet the increasing demand. So therefore gainful employment opportunities. So this gainful employment opportunities is also because if there is increased demand and industries wanted to increase their production to meet the increased demand, so the profits will also be invested, the profits will be invested and new industries will come in, and FDIs will also come into Indian economy because of such a huge demand in the market like India. So all these factors create gainful employment opportunities, therefore, so we can substantially reduce unemployment rate in India. But on the other hand, what if there is an economic recession, or if there is a slow economic growth rate? So that will lead to the higher unemployment. Okay, so it could occur because of the economic downturns or economic recession or slow economic growth, because at that point of time the job opportunities will be very scarce and people will not be able to find employment opportunities, and even they reduce production, right? So industries, because of lower demand, industries will also start reducing the production, and they also start laying off the employees also, right? So because there's no demand and there's no point employing excess workforce in their industry, so they also start laying off their employees also. That will lead to the increase in unemployment rate in India. Now, what is the formula to calculate unemployment rate in India? So the formula is that unemployment rate is calculated using the given formula. So what was that formula? The formula is unemployment rate equals to number of unemployed persons divided by civilian labor force. So this is we need to calculate unemployment rate in India. So either we have to use this particular formula or this particular formula. So either of this we can use to calculate the unemployment rate, right? So in order to calculate the unemployment rate, number of unemployed people divided by the civilian labor force. Now, what is the civilian labor force? And number of unemployed people within the civilian labor force, you get the unemployment rate in India. So the another formula that can be used, unemployment rate is equals to number of unemployed persons and number of employed persons plus number of unemployed persons. So this is also another way through which you can get this. Okay, so for example, imagine that the civilian labor force is 90. Civilian labor force, total labor force is 90, but number of unemployed persons is around 30, right? So this is how you can actually get this number of unemployed persons and number of persons employed plus a number of unemployed persons. So through this formula you can get the unemployment rate that is prevalent in countries like India. So next, what should be the criteria? Actually, what is the criteria for the classification of people who are unemployed? So there is a certain criteria that is followed in India for calculation of unemployment. The criteria is age of the labor force or individual who is part of the labor force. His or her age must be 16 years, above 16 years or 16 years old. And apart from that, he or she available to work full time during the last 4 weeks. So they are available to work for last 4 years, and apart from that, they also actively seeking employment opportunities, or they are ready to work, and they are also actively searching for job opportunities during this period of last 4 weeks. And there are some exceptions also. The exceptions are workers who are temporarily laid off by the industries and they are actively seeking to return to their previous jobs are also classified as unemployed individuals, right? So this is how the criteria was designed for classification of unemployed individuals in India. So next important article is with respect to the Vadhavan port, right? So this was a new port that is going to be developed in the state of Maharashtra. So this is very important for your prelims examination. You just remember that this new port, Vadhavan port, is going to be developed in Maharashtra. So if you look into this particular image, a major port at Vadhavan, Maharashtra. So recently, Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has approved the development of an all-weather greenfield deep draft major port at Vadhavan in Maharashtra, right? So as I've already told you, what is the difference between greenfield projects and brownfield projects, right? So greenfield project is completely a new project. So greenfield projects or greenfield airports or greenfield renewable energy projects, everything are completely new projects. But on the other hand, the brownfield projects are projects which are undertaken in the existing projects. Okay, for example, imagine that there is Indira Gandhi International Airport, in Delhi, right? So if the government decided to extend one more terminal in the Indira Gandhi International Airport, so this will not come under the greenfield project. Rather, it is a brownfield project, because there were already terminals, but the government just extending the one more terminal, creating one more terminal. So because of that reason, it is just a brownfield project. But if government creates a new airport, constructs a new airport, so that would be a greenfield airport. Now this Vadhavan port is also a greenfield port, and in fact the total project cost, including land acquisition component, so it would be around 76,220 crore. And apart from that, it will create a cumulative capacity of 298 million metric tons per annum, right? So this much of a capacity this port can handle per year. And apart from that, it could also have a lot of potential to create around 10 lakh direct and indirect employment opportunities, right? So infrastructure spending from the government is very important, because infrastructure spending creates employment opportunities for the people. Now we'll try to understand the context. So the context is that India has been planning to launch its most ambitious port project, right? So this Vadhavan port project is a greenfield all-weather port project, but it is a most ambitious port project, because it could completely reshape country's maritime capabilities over a period of time. And understand that this Indo-Pacific region has been gaining a lot of prominence, a lot of strategic importance. And at this point of time, developing such a greenfield all-weather port plays a very, very important role over a period of time. So therefore, it could completely reshape country's maritime capabilities. And in fact, this Vadhavan port, as I have already told you, is located in the state of Maharashtra. Okay, so it is located on the western coast in the state of Maharashtra. And this Vadhavan port is considered as a game changer in India's maritime capabilities. This Vadhavan port is considered as a game changer in the overall global shipping, especially in the context of growing importance for the Indo-Pacific. And in fact, it is projected to rank among the top 10 container ports worldwide upon completion. So it is one of the most ambitious project, and the government is also hoped that this port should be top 10 container handling port worldwide once it has completed completion of this project is done. Now, what are the key features of this Vadhavan project? Now, as I have already told you, that the total project cost, including the land acquisition for construction of this port and facilities, would be around 76,220 crore rupees. And in fact, it is an all-weather greenfield deep draft port near the Gujarat border. So it is in Maharashtra, but it is very near to the Gujarat border. And in fact, it has received cabinet approval in June 2024, and it also has some important features. So the other thing that, when you look into the India's, topography, India's geography, it is very important that the majority of ports are located in the western coast, but not on the eastern coast. There are less number of coast on the eastern coast, but more number of ports were located on the western coast. What is the reason for this? So you just try to mention this reason in the comment section, right? So why there are more number of ports on the western coast and less number of ports on the eastern coast? So this is also very important for your examination. So you have to understand the reason why there are more ports on the western coast. And apart from that, when we talk about the annual capacity of this particular Vadhavan port, the annual capacity would be 298 million metric tons per annum. And apart from that, it would also have a specialized berths as well, right? So specialized berths for handling the container or handling these ships. Now, apart from container handling, this port will also include other facilities such as multi-purpose cargo handling, liquid bulk, RO operations, and small craft cap, and also it would cater comprehensively to diverse maritime needs, and that's why we can say that it would completely reshape India's maritime prowess. It would completely reshape India's maritime capabilities, and that's why, because of its diverse and it would serve the diverse multipurpose needs or maritime needs, and because of that reason we can consider that this is one of the most important and most ambitious port project. And apart from that, it would also have a dedicated rail terminal. Now, one thing that you have to understand here, so international north-south transport corridor, right? So this international north-south corridor connecting India, or India in particular and South Asia in general, with Eurasia. So connecting India with Eurasia. So first India, then Iran, from Iran Caspian Sea, from Caspian Sea to Central Asia, and from Central Asia to Russia, and from Russia to Eurasia. So this is how the international north-south transport corridor is actually connected or linked. So therefore, for the connectivity, this is very, very important, right? So the goods would be transported to Iran, and from Iran the goods would be shipped to India, and because of all these things, this Vadhavan port will play a very, very important role. Now, we'll not end this with international north-south transport corridor, but along with this particular corridor, we need to look into this recently launched India Middle East Europe economic corridor, right? So this has been linking India with the Middle East, and from the Middle East to Europe. So there are a lot of ambitious connectivity projects that were recently launched. And apart from that, India wanted to become the net security provider in the region, especially in the context of the Red Sea conflict that has been taking place in recent times. And therefore, in order to further strengthen the maritime prowess of India, it is very important that we need to have such an all-weather ports, right? And at the same time, the Indo-Pacific prominence has been significantly increasing, and since Indo-Pacific prominence has been increasing substantially, it is also emphasizing on developing such an all-weather greenfield project on the western coast, right? So therefore, this particular Vadhavan port will have a dedicated rail terminal and onshore reclamation areas, right? So it will reclaim the onshore areas. So therefore, it would further enhance the capabilities of this particular port, and it would also ensure a seamless integration with national and regional transportation networks as well, right? So it essentially means that integration of this particular port with the seamless connectivity, right? A rail network, road network, or all other connectivity facilities. So that is very important here. And apart from that, so it will be over 3 times the size of India's current largest ports. Now in India, there are few largest ports. One among them was the government operated Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust Authority, right? So this Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust Authority is also located in Mumbai, Maharashtra, and the next one of the largest port was Adani owned Mundra port, right? So if you look into India's largest ports, Adani owned Mundra port and Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust Authority Mumbai port, so this Vadhavan port would be 3 times bigger than, or 3 times larger than, these 2 large ports that India already have. So you can imagine the size of this Vadhavan port. And in fact, it is expected that this Vadhavan port will become operational by 2030, and it will be developed, this Vadhavan port will be developed by reclaiming around 1,448 hectares of sea land. Okay, so sea land will be reclaimed to construct this Vadhavan port, and because we are reclaiming the sea land, we would eliminate the need for the land acquisition, right? So land acquisition for constructing a port is very challenging, because we need to deal with the compensation, we need to deal with the rehabilitation, and it would also significantly increases the project cost, and it would also delay the implementation of the projects. And because we are just reclaiming the sea land, so that would substantially eliminate the need for the land acquisition for the construction of this Vadhavan port. Now, what is the strategic significance of this Vadhavan port? And this is the one thing that we need to understand. So as I have already told you that international north-south transport corridor, so this will play a very important role in further enhancing India's connectivity with Central Asia, Russia and Eurasia. And apart from that, we also have the Chabahar port. And this Chabahar port is also very important because it connects India with Iran and Afghanistan and Central Asia, and international north-south transport corridor, and India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. Keeping in mind all these projects, it is very important that we need to have such a large-scale port projects or such a large-scale ports, right? So when we look into the geopolitical importance of this Vadhavan port, so it would serve as a pivotal hub in the Arabian Sea. Because so when you look into the Vadhavan port in Maharashtra, it is strategically placed to facilitate trade routes linking India with the Middle East, Europe, Central Asia, Africa, all those regions. And because of that reason, it has a lot of strategic importance. And we should not forget that India Middle East economic corridor, because it is one of the starting point for the India Middle East economic corridor that recently gaining a lot of prominence across all the participating countries. And therefore this Vadhavan port is poised to play a very important and very pivotal role in further enhancing India's trade connectivity across all these countries or across different regions. So this is the strategic importance of developing Vadhavan port in Maharashtra. Now, one thing that you need to understand, so this is very important from the prelims perspective, and you can also quote this port if you write the mains answer as well. So the next important article is with respect to the classical languages, and this is also one of the very important topic from your exam point of view, right? So what is the context? So context is that the central government has been looking into the linguistic expert committee recommended tweaks in a criteria for granting classical language status. Now, so we have certain classical languages, for example, Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, Odia, Telugu, Sanskrit. So these were the classical languages the government has declared over a period of time, right? So when we talk about the classical languages, Tamil, Malayalam, and Kannada, and Telugu, Sanskrit, and Odia. Right, so these were the classical languages. The status of classical language was granted to these 6 languages, right? But recently the central government has been looking into making some certain changes in the criteria of designating the classical language or criteria for giving classical language status to certain languages. Because see, understand, there was a increasing demand to recognize certain languages as classical languages, because Marathi, there was a demand from last 1 decade that Marathi should be placed under this classical language, Bengali should be placed under this classical language, and even Maithili, Assamese should be placed under classical languages. And because of that reason, and classical language status criteria is also a very strict criteria, and because of that reason, not all languages are able to get into the classical languages status. But on the other hand, in recent times, there has been an increasing demand to recognize more languages as classical languages, and criteria was also very strict. The government has been looking into changing the criteria of giving this classical language status to different languages. Now, as I have already told you that there were 6 languages which were already accorded the classical language status. First, Tamil was given the classical language status in the year 2005, followed by Sanskrit in 2000. Tamil was given classical language status in 2004, followed by Sanskrit in 2005, and then Kannada in 2008. And Telugu again 2008. Malayalam was given classical language status in 2013, and Odia was given classical language status in 2014. Right, so it is very important. You should also remember the years when they were recognized as classical languages, because you can get questions on chronological order when they were recognized as classical languages, right? Now, what is the current criteria for recognizing any language as classical language, or giving according the status of classical language to any language? What is the criteria to do that? The criteria is that any language should have high antiquity of its early texts and a recorded history of over 1500 to 2000 years. Now, majority of these languages, including Assamese and Bengali, Marathi, so they do not have such a a record of 1500 to 2000 years, right? So in fact, it is a very old, and that is too much for any language to evolve and develop, right? So because of that reason, not many languages were included as classical language. This is the first first part of the criteria. And secondly, there should be a body of ancient literature and texts that were existing, and that can be considered as valuable heritage by the generations of speakers. So this would be the second point in the criteria to be recognized as a classical language. And the literary tradition be original and not borrowed from any other speech or community. So this would be the another part. And classical language and literature being distinct from modern, and they may also be a discontinuity between classical languages and its later forms or its offshoots. So these four are the criteria to recognize any language as the classical language. So if any language meet this particular criteria, and that language will be accorded the classical language status. And presently only 6 languages have fulfilled this criteria, and then they have recognized as classical languages. Now, what are the benefits of recognizing any language as classical language, right? So designation of any language as a classical language actually enjoys certain benefits. What are those benefits? So firstly, there will be an international awards for scholars in these particular languages, and apart from that, establishment of centers of excellence for these particular classical languages, and also creation of professional chairs in universities. And all these are the benefits of recognizing any language as the classical language. However, why center wanted to change the criteria to recognize any language as a classical language? So one reason was the criteria given to recognize any language as classical language is very rigid and strict, and because of that reason, not many languages were included in this classical language status. However, recent times there were increasing demands from different states and literary circles, including Maharashtra, West Bengal, Assam. So what they demand? The demand was that languages like Marathi, Bengali and Assamese and Maithili should be accorded the classical language status, right? So that was the demand they have been repeatedly making. So the demand for Marathi has been pending from last 1 decade, and in fact there were multiple assurances from the central government also. But in 2014, a committee that was chaired by Ranganath Patre, right? So this particular committee headed by or chaired by Ranganath Patre concluded that Marathi meets all the criteria to be included as or to be given as a classical language status. And because of that reason, the center wanted to devise a new criteria for recognizing any language as a classical language, so that more languages would be included in this classical language status. And next important article is with respect to Chinese assertiveness and aggression in the South China Sea. And there's a conflict between Philippines and China has been regularly taking place within the South China Sea. We'll try to understand this in a very detailed manner. Now, so when we look into the South China Sea is located in the southern part of China, and where majority of these Asian countries, right? So these 10 countries which are collectively known as Asian countries, Association for Southeast Asian Nations. So it is a grouping of 10 Southeast Asian countries. So majority of the countries have been sharing their borders with the South China Sea, but on the other hand, China has been claiming sovereignty over the South China Sea, and it has also been building artificial islands such as the Parcel Island, Spratly Islands. So it has been building artificial islands, military bases, and it very often creating roadblocks for the navies of other countries and fishermen from these 10 Asian countries. So therefore we can say that Chinese aggression and assertiveness in the South China Sea has been increasing in recent times. So because of that reason, Chinese aggression and assertiveness is of course a concern for all these Asian countries, majority of which sharing their borders with the South China Sea. But in recent times, the most prominent conflict or dispute over South China Sea was between China and Philippines, right? So it is most prominent among the bilateral disputes between China and other countries. The South China Sea dispute between Philippines and China was gained a lot of prominence in recent times, right? So now Philippines was under the president Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. was currently the president of Philippines. And in fact, the Ferdinand Marcos Jr. had adopted a more assertive stance against China in the South China Sea. Right, so there was a dispute between China and Philippines in the South China Sea, but this president of Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., had adopted a more assertive and aggressive stance against China in the South China Sea, like how China has actually, adopted a stance over this South China Sea. And in fact, the shift in foreign policy of this Philippines is actually coupled with Philippines strengthening relationship with the US. And apart from that, Philippines has also been getting regular support from these Quad countries. I hope you knew about these Quad countries. So US, India, Japan and Australia. So these 4 countries are Quad members, and this change in stance of Philippines over China with respect to the South China Sea dispute is particularly because of 2 reasons. One reason was strengthening Philippines' relations with the US in recent times, and Philippines also getting a constant and regular support from all these Quad countries against Chinese belligerents in the South China Sea. So because of that reason, there is a shift in the foreign policy of Philippines under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Okay, so in fact, the Chinese assertiveness and aggression in the South China Sea has actually been altering the geopolitical dynamics of this Indo-Pacific region, because South China Sea is also part of the Indo-Pacific, larger Indo-Pacific, we can say that. But on the other hand, all these Quad countries and countries who have direct interests, direct and indirect interests over this Indo-Pacific region, so very often claiming that Chinese assertiveness would not be good for the rule of law, right? So freedom of navigation and overflight would face challenges because of Chinese assertiveness and aggression in the South China Sea. So therefore, this particular situation has highlighted a delicate balance between security concerns and economic interests in this particular area. Right, so we need to understand Philippines shifting foreign policy under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. So 2 reasons because of which there was a clear change in the foreign policy of Philippines. One was its strengthening relationship with the US, and Quad countries are also regularly supporting Philippines, and because of that reason there was a changed stance or changed foreign policy of Philippines. Right, so we have discussed that Ferdinand Marcos Jr. very often criticizing Chinese illegal, coercive and aggressive and deceptive actions in this South China Sea. Especially he criticized and he used these words against China in Shangri-La dialogue that took place in Singapore. And apart from that, when we talk about the US-Philippines relationship, so it has been further gaining a lot of prominence in recent times. Okay, so because when we talk about China is a threat. China has been challenging US hegemony across different parts of the world, especially in this Indo-Pacific region. Also, China has been challenging US hegemony, and because of that reason, now US has been looking to towards countries with which it can work to curtail Chinese assertiveness and aggression in different regions. So Indo-Pacific was one such theater where US has been regularly working with countries like Philippines and even India also. And because of that particular reason, US has steered this Quad initiative, Quadrilateral Security Dialogue Framework. And after that, there are also increased tensions between China and Philippines in South China Sea in recent times. And because of that reason, Marcos Jr., President of Philippines, warned of a potential act of war if China continues this assertiveness and aggression. So that would be considered as a potential act of war, and if Philippines or if Philippine people are killed by Chinese forces. China plans to arrest trespassers in claimed areas of June 15, 2023. And apart from that, we need to understand the strategic importance of Philippines in the Indo-Pacific region. So, Philippines also have a strategic importance in the Indo-Pacific region because of its crucial geographical location. Right, so because of its crucial geographical location, US is very often cooperating with the Philippines or strengthening its relation with Philippines to challenge Chinese assertiveness and aggression in the region. And US has also identified Philippines as one of the most important partner in the Indo-Pacific region to counter Chinese influence. And after that, in recent times, there were also attempts of military modernization because $35 billion acquisition list. So that was approved in January for enhancing surveillance and even power projection capabilities on the part of Philippines to, further face the challenge that is being posed by Chinese assertiveness and aggression in this South China Sea, right? So you can see Spratly Islands, Parcel Islands. So there were different islands which were constructed and which were also used as military bases by China. And after that, there is also a revitalization of strategic bases because there were plans to modernize the Subic Bay for naval operations and Clark Air Base for joint sea and land operations to deal with the Chinese, increasing threat. So there was also increasing international support and dual engagement challenges. Okay, so increasing support from especially from Quad countries. So now when we talk about the Quad countries, as I've already told you, Quad has 4 member countries: US, India, Japan and Australia. So Quad countries are also regularly assisting Philippines through arms, ammunition and material support, right? So military and material support, because India delivers BrahMos supersonic missiles, so worth of 374 million to Philippines recently. And in fact, Japan, which is also a Quad partner, has been providing coastal surveillance radars and funds, patrol ships also. And Australia is the second largest bilateral grant aid donor to the Philippines. So all these member countries have been regularly extending support to the Philippines so that it could better challenge the Chinese assertiveness in the region. And in fact, the US has also followed this cautious approach with respect to dealing with China and aiding Philippines. The Mutual Defense Treaty since 1951. So that because of concerns about the ongoing another front against China also. And apart from that, the problem with the Philippines is that there is a huge economic reliance on China. Despite having a lot of bilateral issues, the Philippines deepened its economic cooperation substantially, and so therefore there is actually 9.1 billion state directed finance to previous administrations, 2002 2022. So therefore it has been creating a challenges of dual engagement scenario. Dual engagement in the sense that Philippines on the one hand depended heavily on China, but on the other hand it has been confronting Chinese assertiveness and aggression in the South China Sea. So that makes this particular thing more and more challenging, or engagement of Philippines with the China more and more challenging, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.